The Small Firm Roadmap with Stephanie Everett, episode 52. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Profit with Law. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and today is a bonus guest episode, and I have a wonderful guest for you. This is going to be a doozy. But before I launch into the intro of this esteemed guest, I would like to just remind you that we have our Law Firm Growth Summit coming up December 16th. It is absolutely free to attend. It is virtual. You do not need to get on a plane. You do not need to leave your office or your home, and you can attend every session if you'd like, or just the ones that make sense for you. So go over to lawfirmgrowthsummit.com, lawfirmgrowthsummit.com, put in your info, and get on the list right now for that free entry into the summit. And our guest today is actually going to be one of the speakers at the summit, and I am really happy to introduce you to her here. You may know her. If you're familiar with a brand called Lawyerist, then you probably are familiar with her name. Stephanie Everett is a key person there at Lawyerist, and they've recently released a book, and the book is actually very well written, and it's probably going to be the number one go-to resource of small firms to learn how to think about their firm as a business in today's day and age. The name of the book is The Small Firm Roadmap, and it's a compilation of multiple authors from Lawyerist, A Survival Guide to the Future of Your Law Practice by Aaron Street, Sam Glover, Stephanie Everett, and Marshall, I'm not sure how to pronounce the last name, Lichty or Lichty. So Stephanie works with solo and small firm lawyers to create amazing businesses because work should be awesome. I'm going to let her tell you about what she does, but I really love what Lawyerist is doing. Of all of the organizations out there educating small firms on the growth of their business and business best practices and what they should be looking at and doing, I think that Lawyerist has it right. I think Lawyerist is doing a good job of giving a broad foundation of business as an underlying foundation of business, and I really like what they're doing, and I really like what Stephanie had to say in this interview. So that's why I'm super excited to bring it to you, because it's very much in line with a lot of what I have been saying and will continue to say in this podcast and whatever other mediums I can get on. So coming up, you're going to hear the interview with Stephanie. We're going to talk about the financial side of the business of your law firm. We're going to talk about the idea of a financial dashboard. We're going to mention the importance of cash flow management. And we're going to talk about balancing multiple responsibilities and creating more margin in your life, which will then lead into some dabbling in a talk about technology, implementation and solutions. And we're also going to talk about thinking outside the box and finding alternate solutions to your problems. This is a very, very well-rounded episode. It covers a lot of areas, and I hope that you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed recording it with Stephanie. So without further ado, I'm going to have that interview queued up for you here. Enjoy the listen, and I will catch you on the next episode. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Stephanie, I like to just give everybody some background on your past, where you've come from, and how you ended up at Lawyerist, what Lawyerist does, and what you do for them. So if you can just give us a quick synopsis, or a long one, of how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, because it's not where I thought I'd be, right? Went to law school. I am a lawyer, graduated and went into, started with a big law firm. And after about 5 years, left and started my own practice with a partner. So it was the two of us, and we took my legal assistant with us and, launched this firm. And in about 7 years, we grew that from just our little team to a team of 20 lawyers. And I was the managing partner and just found the business aspect of practicing law fascinating and fun. And also had a bunch of colleagues coming to me saying, how did you do that? What are you guys doing? What are you doing that's working that maybe we haven't figured out yet? And in those conversations, realized maybe there were some pieces missing for a lot of lawyers, that things that I thought felt common to me maybe weren't so common. And so in 2015, I shifted into starting to help lawyers with their practices. Had the awesome opportunity to launch an incubator here in Georgia, where I live, with the state bar and the 5 law schools. And so I led an incubator teaching newer lawyers how to start socially conscious law firms. And then somewhere along the way, met Sam Glover, one of the co-founders of Lawyerist, and he was like, hey, you should come work with us. So 2 weeks later, that's what I was doing. So Lawyerist also is a community that we are helping lawyers figure out how to design and implement, client-centered firms that we think will be necessary to survive the future. And I guess just to finish that out, my role there is I lead the community team and work specifically with lawyers through some free programs we have and also paid programs in doing just that.
Now, just picking up and leaving and going to work for Lawyerist, did you close all of your past opportunities, or did you stay engaged with the firm you were running? How did that play out?
Yeah, so in 2015, I officially left the law firm and sold my interest in the firm to the two partners that I had at that time. I had one client who was like, will you please stay with me? And so for a little while, I think I tried to handle his case on my own, and I had associated new co-counsel. That case ended up going to a jury trial, like a year and a half. The case still lives on, is the point. It's now tied up into the Court of Appeals. And I learned very quickly that it's hard to have your toe in the practice of law, right? Like I couldn't do the things I was doing as a consultant or coach and still practice law. So I think technically still have that one case going, but I'm pretty much done with an active practice.
And you're happy with where you ended up, so you're perfectly fine with having completed that part of your journey and moved on to helping others with the growth of their practices. Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, I sometimes miss trial. Like there's nothing better than that perfect cross-examination when you have the expert on the stand and you've just nailed them. And it's, an amazing feeling, or the feeling when you actually win a case for a client, or, you got this awesome result for them. Those highs are undescribable, like it really is a high that you get on when you have those kind of victories. And so I would say that my highs aren't as high now that I don't practice law, but I still get that feeling. I love helping other people and teaching lawyers and seeing their success and seeing how they, if I can help them help their clients, then, that's awesome. So it's different. I'm not going to say I don't miss it sometimes, but then there's other days where I'm like, no, this is exactly what I need to be doing right now. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, and I know from my own experience that it's a different kind of high, but having somebody who you're working with, make some massive shift in their law firm and, take it to the next level, achieve that next goal, just figure out how to get past where they were. That's another rewarding high, almost the same as getting that win for a client in trial. I wouldn't know because I'm not an attorney, so I've never been to trial, but I imagine that the feeling is similar.
Absolutely. And I've had great success working with attorneys, and I love hearing their wins, big and small. Sometimes it's as small as like, hey, I finally unlocked this automation that I've been trying to figure out, and it's just made my whole life easier. Or I have, attorneys tell me that now they've taken a vacation with their family for the first time in 5 years. And or, so that's rewarding too, because I'm actually impacting people's lives. So yeah.
Awesome. So I'm going to switch gears here and just go into picking your brain and hopefully getting some nuggets out that will be really helpful for our listeners. Now that they know who you are, you obviously have your pulse on what's going on in the solo and small firm community. So, with your experience and where you're at today, and by the way, you recently published a book with a few other co-authors, the Small Firm Roadmap, and I suggest that anybody who is listening to this, if you're resonating with anything that Stephanie is sharing, go out on Amazon and purchase that book. It's very informative. But my question to you is, what do you see as the biggest problem or the biggest set of problems plaguing the legal industry today that's really holding people back from achieving what they set out to achieve when they started their firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my answer may have even just changed. As we're recording this, last week, I was at the Clio Cloud conference, and they released their 2019 legal trends report. And I think we were a little sad that one of the overwhelming pieces of information in that is that lawyers are not answering their phones or responding to emails in an adequate way when potential clients call. And we were talking about it afterwards, because we're like, we're sitting here trying to teach lawyers how to innovate their firms and really change the way we practice law, and kind of, we're thinking about these big picture things. But at the end of the day, we need to help lawyers answer their phone and respond to email. So I think maybe all of that, though, comes down to the fact that somewhere along the way, and we talk about this in the book, we were told that we're a profession, that we're professionals. And so therefore we often, I've heard lots of lawyers say, oh, don't call my law firm a business. Like, it's not a business, it's a profession. And I think we're fooling ourselves with that mindset and that attitude, because if you look at, I think the number 2 reasons that people file bar complaints are, lack of communication, lack of responsiveness, and mishandling client funds. Well, both of those things tie back to how you run your business, how often you communicate with your clients, whether you're answering your phone. And so I think the mindset has to change, obviously, and we have to recognize that actually running our law firms like a business and picking up what we see our friends in other industries doing is not only, it's really smart, it's what's going to help us be better lawyers, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I love that you shared that, and it was quite shocking. I mean, truth is, it wasn't shocking, but it was putting the problem out there with actual data, and in the Clio Cloud report, that really highlights something that a previous guest of mine, Maddie Martin from Smith AI, shared on the podcast here, talking about how the hidden secret behind customer satisfaction, and also the sales process and closing sales and not missing opportunities, is simply the phone not getting answered and people not getting a rapid response to their immediate issue. And they already highlighted in Clio's report 2 years ago in 2017, they had a statistic that shared one of the big they contrasted the customer experience with what the lawyer's perception was. Mm-hmm. And there was a huge differentiation between how urgent the issue is in the client's eyes versus in the attorney's eyes. And I've spoken to this on previous episodes of the podcast as well. And basically, it makes sense from a human perspective that when you are knowledgeable in your area of law, you understand how critical something is or how really unimportant it is. But if you don't put yourself in your client's shoes and think about whether it's causing them to freak out, then you're missing the boat. And that's, I think, yes, we need to communicate, but I think what's causing that lack of communication is that in the attorney's eyes, that communication doesn't seem to be very important. if it was, like if the client called and said, hey, I'm in, my ex just came in the house and they're in the middle of beating me, and they would assign the right level of urgency to that call. But if they called and said, hey, child support wasn't paid today, to the attorney, it's like, okay, we have to take some more action. We're going to file some paperwork. I'll get back to them eventually. But in the meantime, the client is like, I can't go shopping right now. What do I do? So they're looking for an immediate response. And the attorney's like, yeah, I'll get to it when I get to it. And that's really where that disparity is happening, I think, in that communication shortfall that's happening.
Yeah. One of the things we talk about a lot is that one of the traits that we think is going to be important for lawyers of the future is empathy. And I think that's exactly what you were just describing is being able to put yourself in your client's shoes and have that empathetic mindset so that you can appreciate what might feel urgent to them, even though it might be to you, and to then intentionally design your systems and your processes in your firm in order so that you can respond to that client when they feel like they're in crisis. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, so I want to go back to the comment or the statement that you said, and I saw it in your book, and that is lawyers, law firm owners perceiving themselves as a profession and not a business. And this is really why I started serving the legal industry in the first place. Just a quick background for you on how I ended up here is my background is 20 years in the IT industry. Then I did a transition change into accounting. And to set myself apart when I started my accounting practice, I went into more the advisory services. I became a profit first professional. And that's how I started getting law firms as clients who started referring each other to me. And that's when I saw this huge disparity, because there are a ton of coaches and consultants out there that are helping firms grow, but they're all working on the vanity side of it. They're helping them grow their top line. They're helping them grow their staff. They're helping them get into a nice office, but they're ignoring the financial side of it. And what was happening is I'm looking at these firms that on the outside look like they're a massive success, but on the inside, they're struggling to make payroll from payroll cycle to payroll cycle, and they're moving money between from credit card to credit card and their personal funds and all of that, and nobody's talking about that. And that's really what started my journey with the Profit with Law podcast, and where my business is going is to educate the market, the business side of running a law firm. So I resonate very well with that statement. But if we can spend some time there, why do you think that is happening? And are you noticing that law firm owners are starting to see the light and starting to shift their mentality on this?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously the attorneys that we work with, I mean, we probably attract attorneys that are ready for that mindset. And so they come to us for that help. And to be fair, I say this all the time. I'm like, no judgment, you guys. No one ever taught you this. And so, I have one person, the people in our paid program the program's called Lab. And so we call them Labsters, which we think is kind of funny, but maybe nobody else does, especially if you say it like with a Northeastern accent. I don't know. So we had this one Labster in our program, and she knew that she needed to understand her financials. She knew that she needed to look at her data. And quite frankly, she was terrified. She was just scared of what it was going to tell her about who she was, of whether she was a good business owner, it just fear. And for some folks, it's fear and also just not knowing. They don't know, they don't understand. They just assume that it's bad. And so we worked with her, like literally sat down side by side and started putting together, her KPIs and her financial dashboard. And she came out of it and was like, oh my gosh, this actually isn't so bad. Like, I'm actually doing really well. And now she has this information and this confidence and this knowledge. And so I think that obviously I love lawyers. I am a lawyer, and I come back to, it's not our fault. I mean, nobody's really ever taught us this before, and no one's ever explained to us what the financial side of a business looks like. And to your point, why you can't just look at revenue, and why, you know, there's more to the whole financial picture. I mean, I'm doing a workshop later today on cash flow management because so many people don't understand how cash flow in a business works, or why they need to be paying attention to those numbers, or more importantly, when the numbers get bad, what levers they need to pull to fix it. And so that's the kind of information that we're starting to give to attorneys, that people are wanting, that they're starting to understand. And I think as they understand it, it's easy for them to buy on, to buy in and be like, yes, this is what we need. It's just that no one's ever taught us this before. I taught a class at Emory Law School, close to where I live, twice now, on sort of the economics of a law firm. And it was a class I just purely made up at the time. I didn't have a textbook. I didn't have anything to go by at that time. We're lucky now some law professors have recently reached out and they want to use our book as a textbook, which is awesome. And we're super excited that could be a resource for law students, because I think more law schools are starting to talk about this now. But certainly when I was in school 20 years ago, there was no HR class or accounting for your law firm or finance class. Just wasn't really discussed or taught. So.
Yeah, and there's and you shared the story of your client who was scared of her numbers, and ultimately it ended up looking really good, and it was a way of her, once she got over that fear, that became a source of motivation for her to say, okay, this is really working. Now how do I do more of this? But I think that there's another aspect to that, and if you're afraid of looking at your numbers because you're afraid of what you're going to find, then understand that if you find negative information, without that information, you wouldn't know what to fix, right? Exactly. So diving into the numbers and really starting to understand them is what's going to help you get things working better. I have a client that on the outside, the firm is a smashing success, but on the inside, their profit was at zero. And we started to look at their numbers and found that their accounts receivable was growing year after year with uncollectible funds. And so instead of trying to figure out how to bring in more business, which is the automatic reaction for a business owner, is, we can't make payroll, or we can't pay the rent, let's figure out how to bring in another client. Instead, we were able to focus on, okay, how do we decrease the amount of uncollectible funds that we're running into? And by changing that, we don't have to change anything about how many clients we're bringing in. Just keep everything running the same, and we can flip the script on this profitability by not losing so much cash in uncollectibles. So it gave us the ability to focus on the right area, whereas without that information, we would be doing the wrong thing. We'd just be compounding the problem.
Yep. Yeah, love that.
So for a solo, I think the one of the problems that they have is that they're trying to do too many things, or they're wearing multiple hats. Can we switch gears and talk about that for a minute? And what is the solution? I mean, I recently had a conversation with somebody who, they've gotten their firm to $100,000 of revenue. But they're barely, and they're taking home money, but they don't have any time. As a matter of fact, one of the things that she told me was, I can't pay for coaching, not because I can't afford the coaching, but because I don't have the time to focus on the coaching. And to me, that was astounding to see somebody they're so busy that they're not going to be able to get past that level that they've achieved because they're unable to do anything else. There's no other wiggle room. So what is your solution for a solo who's gotten to that point where they feel like there's no answer? How do we get them to take a step back and really assess the situation, and then start to figure out how to give themselves some leverage?
Yeah, I think there's obviously a couple of different levels to that answer. Because one way is, I have folks who will look to outsource aspects of what they're doing, and they can afford to do that. And in today's, market, freelance workers, it's just so much easier to get and to have that resource available to you. So that's obviously an easy answer. I think the harder answer, and kind of where I want to go with this, and it's maybe come up with a couple of your questions, is at some point we have to realize that the billable hour is just, in my opinion, very dumb. I have a whole whole list of reasons why I hate it. I was talking to an attorney the other day, and she's like, I think I need to grow. And she was trying to figure out, like, does she need, with the billable hour model, the only way to grow into, to generate more revenue was to, bill more hours or raise her rates. And so she was looking at that and trying to decide if she could afford to bring another attorney on. But she has a child at home with special needs. Flexibility is really important to her. And so she was kind of debating all this. She's like, I have some nice flexibility now, and I don't know if I want to bring on this extra burden. And I was like, there's another option that we as lawyers never discuss. And that is, what if you created another revenue stream that had nothing to do with your time, that we figured out how to bill your services in a new way and offer something different? Because I think trading time for money is just a dumb way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually have an entire episode, or more than one episode, discussing some alternatives like flat fee pricing. And I pulled out my phone to look up the episode number, but I'll get back to it because couldn't get it fast enough. But definitely, I have an episode called "The Death of the Billable Hour."
Yes.
And I am looking to see.
Me too. I want that to be like my slogan, maybe, or my personal mission statement, because I feel like I have billed a lot of hours in my life, and every point one, point two you put down, it sucks a little bit of your soul away. And, and it pits us against our clients. And honestly, like, now I sit in the client seat. My husband and I own a business together that has nothing to do with the law.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to hire a lawyer. And I'm really frustrated with this lawyer right now because, a great example is I had to sign an affidavit for something, and they misspelled my name. They put an E at the end of my name. There isn't one. So I let them know, and then they fixed it. And then I just got an invoice, of course, that comes in the mail still. So, a lot of things wrong with this, but they're very specialized. And so I'm frustrated that I don't have a lot of options with who can do this particular area of law. So I get my invoice in the mail, and I have to send them a check, by the way. There's no online payment option. And they've charged me $144 to go in and fix what they misspelled on the affidavit to begin with. And as a client, I was just livid. And I have tons of examples like that, but it makes me not want to pick up the phone and call my lawyer and not get advice. I'd rather just, it's so frustrating. And it doesn't incentivize the attorneys to be more creative and to be efficient and to use technology and tools in the right way. So, as you said, it's a whole episode worth, but it's just worth repeating. If you're not thinking about that right now, you should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And those episodes are episode 26 and 27, The Death of the Billable Hour and the Anatomy of Flat Fee Pricing. And the accounting industry, I think, is a step ahead of the legal industry in understanding this, because the accounting model is very similar. The professional model is basically what it is. And up until probably about 6 or 7 years ago, practically all accountants were billing by the hour, just like attorneys are. And then this new concept of the flat fee model came out. Then another model came out called value-based pricing. And this will work for some practice areas, may not work for all of them. But the difference between flat fee billing and value-based pricing is flat fee. You're basically packaging a defined number of hours into a package. So you're still billing by the hour, but to the client, they're paying, it's kind of like a not to exceed. So they're paying that flat fee. And then it's your job to figure out how to make that the most efficient as possible. That is one model that can work. But then there's the value-based model is not tied to the work that's happening behind the scenes at all. And instead, you're looking at your client and figuring out what is the value that they're receiving for what you're doing, and completely pricing it based on that. And in a value-priced model, there's two really, really good benefits. And one is that because it's not tied to the work that's happening, it could be extremely profitable for you as the law firm. And because it's based on the value the client's receiving, it's always valuable to them. So everybody is winning. But the other thing is that it's putting your focus entirely on providing value to the client. It's not about how much work did you do, but it's about the end result that you're providing and the experience that they're getting along the way. And I think that's really where the crux of the problem. And I like that you brought this to the billable hour being the issue, because it really is that underlying model or financial model of how you're pricing your services that's really driving the decisions that you make day to day in the firm. So much energy is spent on the firms that are successful. So much energy is spent on figuring out whether or not their associates are billing enough hours, and it makes a very high friction situation between you and your staff, because they have to maintain certain numbers. And if they don't, then you're coming down on them as the firm owner, saying, "Hey, you're not doing your job." And to really run a good business, those numbers have to be high. I mean, it's almost, I mean, one of the things that I really despise about where the history of the legal industry is this misnomer of, oh, if you're not working 60 hours, then you're not you're not really earning your keep. Like, the 40-hour work week doesn't exist when you're an employee of a firm in that old model, and that's broken. Like, how do you work somebody to the bone as part of your business model?
Yeah.
So
I want to challenge lawyers. Like at Lawyerist, as in our company, we have completely flipped that on its head. So our philosophy is, if you can't get your work done in 40 hours or less in a week, we're doing something wrong. And so if we look at that as a sign of a problem. And so, then we want to look at it. And one of our values is find the lever. So we're like, how can we do more with less? So we're constantly challenging ourselves, like, can we cut that workflow down? Can we automate something? Can we do a shortcut? Because and it's kind of fun. It's a little bit of a game for us, but we don't want anyone working more than 40 hours. I mean, maybe if you go to a conference and you include some of the nighttime activities, there's going to be weeks where something crazy happens. But for the most part, like, I'm discouraged. It was a big mindset shift for me when I joined the team, because they were just like, no, stop working. Like, what are you doing? You don't need to just put in extra hours at night to look good. In fact, that makes you look bad, makes you look like you can't do your job. And when you go on vacation, no one's going to bug you. And in fact, you're not really allowed to reach out to people when they're on vacation, because we want to respect their time off and give them that ability to completely, be unavailable. And so I think we have a lot as lawyers. We can do a lot. We have a lot of room for improvement in this area, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. I love that your company is doing that, and that you have that mindset. But I think a lot of this has to do with the way that we were raised, and just the beliefs and assumptions that that are ingrained in us from watching our parents, from watching society in general. I mean, where did the 40-hour work week come from in the first place? There's actually studies that show that the peak productivity happens at 24 hours in the week. And once you exceed 24 hours, you're actually decreasing the productivity. For every minute that you're working, you're getting less done. So, maybe we should have a 24-hour work week. And just, this goes back to Parkinson's law, which is used a lot in time management, and it's an intrinsic part of the profit first system. But Parkinson's law dictates that when you have a finite resource, your consumption of that resource is going to expand to the entire resource available. So if you have 60 hours available, you're going to fill 60 hours with work. And if you have 40 hours available, you'll probably get the same amount done and just fill 40 hours of work. So if you just decrease the amount of hours available, at some point there may not be enough time to get everything done, but generally you're going to make the best use of that time as that pool gets smaller and smaller. So one of the things that we can challenge, and Mike Michalowicz, one of my favorite business authors, he came out with a book called Clockwork. Mm-hmm. And Clockwork is all about running your business in a way that it's not tied to your efforts as the owner directly. And one of the challenges that he sets in there at the beginning of the book is to be able to take a 4-week vacation, because we all could take 2 weeks, even 3 weeks. We can push to kind of front load work before we leave, and then back load catch up work when we get back, and people will still survive without us being there for 3 weeks. But when you get to 4 weeks, things have to be happening on their own. Things can't wait for you for 4 weeks. So if you can get yourself to the point where you're able to take that 4 week vacation and be completely detached from the business, then you've arrived at that point where things are not tied to you directly. So I kind of think that we need to start thinking of ourselves in that model. And this is really hard for solos to wrap their head around because they're everything to their firm, but you need to be able to set your business up to be able to function without everything coming down on your shoulders and relying on you. And I like that you started with, thinking about outside the box about where your work's going to happen. I recently got connected with Kristen Tyler from Law Clerk, and they're actually one of the sponsors of our upcoming virtual summit, virtual conference that we're hosting in December. And that model of being able to be the Uber for freelance attorneys or attorneys who have room on their plate, and you can just go in there and just put in what you're looking for, and boom, you've got a selection of attorneys that can fill your needs. That's a great thing that they're doing, and allows you to start thinking about, instead of thinking about hiring another associate, just think about finding the right people to get the job done. And the same thing with Maddie from Smith AI with their virtual receptionist services and all of their automations in the client communication realm, extending the hours of your firm, extending the bandwidth of your staff to be able to handle all incoming calls and really improve your client communication. These are tools that are out there that can really improve what you're doing. One last thing that I'm going to share is similar to what you said. I've learned this from somebody that I respect, is the DAD method. So delete, automate, delegate. Everything that you do in the firm, you should be looking at to determine, is this necessary? Is this a task that we can remove and just stop doing? That's the delete. Is it something we can automate using technology and or outside services and resources to make this happen on its own? Or can we delegate it and basically bring somebody on or assign it to somebody in the firm that is essentially less costly or more efficient than me to get that done? And I really like that you highlighted that, as the solution. It really starting to figure out how to get things off of our plate is gonna help move the needle in that turnaround.
And there's hope. If you're a solo listening to this thinking, these guys are, full of it, I could never do this. We have a Labster. We opened the book with this example of Megan, who is a true solo. She's the only attorney in her firm. She has some outsourced help in different areas. And she took a 4-week European vacation with her family, and her practice did not fall apart. In fact, it's thriving. It's doing better than ever. And I love that we were able to plan for it. I mean, it was intentional. We had to work to make sure she could get there. But she did, and she had a great time, and she's going to do it again. So this isn't pie in the sky stuff. This is actual stuff that you can do, but you have to change your mindset, start being intentional, and being strategic. And I think that's another thing that we as law firm owners often forget. We kind of run our business because we opened a practice because we thought that's what we should do, and then we just do it the same way everyone else we see is doing it, and we don't really think about why are we doing this and how are we doing this. And so, if this is resonating with you, the first step is to get really clear on what it is you want, what's important to you, and then you can start putting a plan in place for exactly how to do it. It's totally possible.
Yeah, and I think that the key to what Stephanie just said is that you actually need to take time to think about that. Like, we're so busy running and doing, and the second we start our day, it's off to the races, and it's kind of like run around the track until the race is over for the day, and then you go home, and then you come back tomorrow to do it again. And we're not taking the time to really think about everything that we're doing and the direction that we're going. And that requires you to shut down. It requires you to really extract yourself from the day-to-day tasks. And, I recommend that you literally go somewhere, like go hiking or do something that will allow your mind to be at rest and to start thinking about these things. and not have all this other stuff being bombarded at you, so that you can get clear on what is it that you want. What are your priorities? When I started my accounting practice, I was very clear that the purpose of me starting the business was to be able to be present for my kids. I was married, got divorced, and got married again. So I have three older girls. They're 20, 18, and 17 at the time of this recording. And then I've got two little ones, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And when I started with round two, I call it, I saw an opportunity to be present in a different way than I was the first time around with my older girls. And I want to be able to shut down at 2:00, 2:30 in the afternoon when my kids get off of school. They're not in school yet; they're too young. But when that happens, and they get dismissed at 2:30 in the afternoon, I want to be there and be absolutely present. So I am very intentionally designing my business around the flexibility of me being able to do that. And I think that thinking about our business in that way of really getting clear on what our priorities are and what we want to have happen will transform what your law practice looks like today versus what it looks like a year from now. But it's not going to happen if we don't take that time. It's kind of like a timeout and just say, hey, let's get clear on this, and then let's move forward from there.
Yeah.
So we talked about what the problems are in the industry. Are there exciting things that you see happening that you think are going to become the next big thing that where the industry is going, that somebody can start to think about implementing into their practice that you think is going to become a mainstay of firms in the future?
Yeah, so maybe this is a little bit of disappointing news or answer from my perspective. I think in terms of like yes, probably when you put it all together, it feels like a big change, like obviously pricing our services differently, thinking about what we offer and how we offer it. I think as a whole, that package probably looks very different than maybe what we're doing today. But I really think that the best way forward is to think about those 1% increments. So I know there was a coach who was a cyclist coach who worked with a team, and his whole goal was, we're going to get 1% better, every day, every week, every month, whatever the increment is. I think we also saw this in the CLIA Trends report last week, that if you look at that chart that they have in there, the firms that did 1% better, are exponentially, there's a huge gap now between them and the firms who maybe weren't doing 1% better or even decreased by 1%. So I think the takeaway that I want to leave your listeners with is, yes, there are big changes to be had, but it's all about those small incremental 1% changes that you can do consistently to get to there. So pick a part of your practice, either think about what you're offering or how you're offering it, talk to your clients, talk to prospective clients, really get in their heads about what's troubling them. What would they do with a magic wand? How would they change what it's like to work with you, from how you and when you take phone calls to your intake system. There's so many, the opportunities are vast. We can dissect any part of your practice and probably find something that needs to be, or many things that need to be improved. So just pick one, because here's the other problem is I know way too many lawyers who listen to this or read a book or go to a conference, and they come back with the list of hundreds or 100 ideas. We're going to do all the things. And I tell everybody in lab when they connect with me, I'm like, you can do anything, but you can't do everything, at least not at once. And I think we almost get paralyzed when we come up with so many ideas, then we just don't tackle any of them. So keep that big list, brainstorm that list, that's fine, and put that on your long-term issues list. I think Warren Buffett called it his avoid at all costs list, because from that list, he would then pick the 1 or 2 most important things that you need to do next. And you do those 2 things, and you avoid everything else on that long list at all costs. Focus on the 1 or 2 things, knock those out of the park, and then you move to the next thing. Now let me go back to that list. What's the next most important thing? And if you can just do that in a very systematic way, then, you're there. Where I think I probably provide value is sometimes it's very overwhelming for folks, and it really helps them to talk through that list and figure out what those priorities are, because maybe they come into it thinking this is their priority, but when we start digging some layers back and uncovering it, it's like, oh, well, that really is tied to this. And so, like a great example is I had someone who I started working with recently, and he really thought he needed to hire someone, that was his next highest priority. But it turned out that we needed to get his finances straight, because he didn't even know if he could afford to hire someone, what he could pay him, or feel comfortable that, he could make that decision, because he didn't really understand where his finances were. And so we had to kind of start there. And now he's finishing that process up with a goal of hiring someone Q1 next year. So, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
don't be overwhelmed, and don't be freaked out if you need that help. And maybe, if you don't have a professional coach or, someone that can help you with that, there's mastermind groups, there's lots of opportunities to get help. I guess that's the other message. But get a friend, get a business partner, get somebody, because a lot of times you do need to talk these things out. And I think that's the other thing as a profession that we sort of have missed, is this idea that we can help each other. So my father was a business owner. He just retired last year, and he was in a 20 group where he would meet with peers who weren't direct competitors. They were from similar sized markets doing what he did in other parts of the country. And they would meet and they would open up their books and share their financials and share the good and the bad and all the things. And they really helped each other. I think lawyers somehow, we're so competitive and adversarial by nature. I mean, it's our business literally to fight one another, that we sometimes forget when it comes to putting on our business owner hat, there's benefits to helping each other and to working with each other and to be in community with each other. So sorry, I got a little bit on my soapbox, but
No, it's fine. I love that. And I think that there's another aspect to what's preventing people from being willing to be open and join a community or get the help, is that there's a certain level of macho going on, that, I'm an attorney and I know everything. So how can I show up and say I don't know everything? And people are afraid to be vulnerable and to say, hey, I need help with this. And a lot of, when we look at the decisions of what kind of office you're going to have, and we see overspending in that area of the practice, that's what that's all about. It's all about creating a facade and an image that makes you look really good. And it's almost like you've been groomed to be there, because when you started working in law, you worked for a firm, and that's what they cared about. They cared about the vanity. They cared about what their perception to the public was, and therefore it feels like that's the number one priority. So it's no wonder that it's ingrained in us to want to continue being that way, and therefore we can't possibly share our dirty laundry. So I think that if you start to just get back in touch with the fact that, hey, you're human, and believe it or not, there's so many people out there that are struggling with the same things that you're struggling with. You're not alone, and being a part of a community, wherever that is going to allow you to see that you're not alone, and having people on the journey with you is probably the number one thing that's going to help you get up every time you fall down and brush yourself off and keep going.
yeah.
One of my mentors says all the time, we tend to overestimate what we can do in a day, but we underestimate what we can do in a year. Mm-hmm. And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier, that, when you come back and you've got this list of things that you need to do, that 1% incremental change, just pick one thing. There's a book by Gary Keller, and I think it's Joe Papasan or something like that, called The One Thing. Mm-hmm. And that entire book is focused on figuring out what is the one thing that you should be focusing on next that's going to be the domino that's going to knock over other dominoes and, get things moving for you. And that's a challenge. It's hard to identify what that is, but just pick something and focus on it. And, this is what I do with my one-on-one coaching clients, is we're only going to focus on one aspect of the practice for 90 days, and we're going to fix it, and we're going to implement new processes. By the end of the 90 days, those things have become habits, and now we can move on to the next thing and focus on that. And I think that that's really good advice that you shared, Stephanie. And that story with the cycling coach, I heard it in the intro to Atomic Habits. So that's a book, and that might be where you read it as well, where the author shares that story. Basically, I think it was the English cycling team that hadn't won a medal in years, and he focused on just these tiny little 1% changes in their performance, and they ultimately ended up taking home multiple medals from that work that he was doing. So I love this conversation, and we're running out of time, so we're gonna wrap it up here. But Stephanie, can you just share with our listeners how they can stay in touch with you if they resonated with you, they want to take the next step, and maybe they want to join your lab program, or they want to learn more about what Lawyerist has to offer as resources for them? Can you just share the best one thing for them to do to keep in touch with you?
It's really simple. Go to lawyerist.com. So it's lawyerist.com. You can join our insider group there for free. It'll be pretty obvious on the homepage how to do that. We have a ton of free content and templates and things you can download. And once you do that, you'll get some messages from me on how to get even more involved in the community. So we'll kind of give you that path for all the different ways we help lawyers. So just go to lawyerist.com and join Insider.
Awesome. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time today. And for everybody who's listening, hopefully this impacted you in a wonderful way. And just the one takeaway is just choose something to focus on. Take some time to really think about where you want to take your firm, and then just start that journey of making those small incremental changes to improve your life, up-level your firm, and start to boost your bottom line, and really just free up some time for you and live life. So with that, have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.